Hello everyone and welcome to episode 22 of my Lancastrians Yorkists vlog. And remember that this time we're looking at the breadth topic at the end of this Edexcel exam unit. And the breadth topic is really focused on the relationship between the monarch and the nobility and how that caused problems and unrest and disputes during the whole period 1399 to 1509. So last time we dealt specifically with that with major landowners and their influence and their kind of way they helped but also hindered the monarchy. This time we're focusing in on two other issues. The first is the importance of retaining. This again between 1399 and 1509, and the question around this would be, well, whether retaining is the thing that causes that this period to be one of so many disputes, fractiousness, and actually causes the Wars of the Roses. There are historians who have said that retaining is the key reason that it all kicks off so badly. It still would have been problems, but it kicks off so badly because of this. So, quick kind of introduction to what retaining is. And this needs us to step back into understanding what feudalism is. Traditional feudalism, in traditional feudalism, a lord gave some land, or fief, to a vassal. The lord promised to protect the vassal, and in return they got the land, and they promised loyalty to the lord and that they would fight for the lord if necessary. And that's kind of the way the whole system's built up. The king gives out land to the nobility give out land to the gentry give out land to the peasants, and each one of them offers to or promises to help out basically if there's trouble. But by the 15th century, this system was breaking down because the fiefs were hereditary, because the states had become divided through marriage and inheritance, and you kind of needed to check or guarantee that you had the right kind of vassals, i.e. ones that would be helpful in a fight rather than ones which, peasants that were old or weren't trained or not interested or just not very good at fighting. So this led to what was called bastard feudalism, which was the concept of paying someone to be your vassal rather than giving them land. I mean, this is in essence what we do nowadays. It's just giving someone a contract and some money and saying, right, now you are my vassal. These people were called retainers, and they would wear the livery, the badges or colours of the nobleman. The whole system was called maintenance, and just like employment nowadays, it wasn't hereditary. Retainers had contracts that could be dissolved if they weren't very good or for any other reason. And likewise, when the lord died, then the retainers might well seek protection or employment with a different lord. So there is a traditional view that over mighty subjects, or mighty subjects even, just collecting massive groups of these retainers was key to destabilising the kingdom. And I guess Warwick is the best example of this in the middle of the period, or Richard of York as well. Richard of York comes back from Ireland in 1450 at the end of Kay's Rebellion, bringing with him thousands of people. So kind of all these hangers-on, spoiling for a fight, trained to fight, kind of this idea of like almost mini armies was thought to be the trigger for the Wars of the Roses. As against that, you would say actually the problem here is that Henry VI is not a competent leader, and that it would always have kicked off. It just might have kicked off with fewer people fighting. Equally, bear in mind that there were a number of occasions through the period where noblemen have to go off and fight wars against France. The 100 Years' War is in full flow for the first half of our period, and then later on in the second half there are occasions where, where we fight against France, and on other occasions where the king needs the support of his noblemen with their retainers to fight against other powers. Against Scotland, Henry VII needs to fight against Lambert Simnel's invasion, again at the Battle of Stoke. So the liverymen, the retainers, are useful at times as well. But were they a problem? Well, there was legislation against them, and that does suggest that people did think, oh, this is getting a bit out of control at the time. So there were, and that there's a distinction between like what's necessary and helpful, and the idea that actually these liveries are now getting out of control, they're getting too large, they're becoming a problem in between the times when they're helpful. There were 3 acts passed in the 1390s, just before our course starts, which suggests that it was already an issue even before, well, in the reign of Richard II, that he was worried about it. And the fact that there were several attempts, of course, suggests that they didn't solve the problem. Then no more kind of legal attempts to resolve things until 1468, when Edward IV passed a law which outlawed retaining, except for legal advisors, domestic servants, state officials, and the key one, those in lawful service. So, what does that mean? And that was the problem, really. It was a huge loophole which nobility could corrupt and use to their own ends. And they did. Henry VII has another go at sorting things out in 1504, right at the end of our period, again suggesting that it was still an issue in 1504. His law said that lords had to receive written permission from the king to retain men, like a license, basically. So you can only have retainers if you've got that license, and you had to provide a list of retainers to the king for his approval. And lords were fined for disobedience, as you'd expect with Henry VII. He's on the make, looking for cash out of it. But this probably is more than just money making. This is Henry VII being, again, his usual cautious and suspicious self, and trying to make sure that only his friends have retainers. So was retaining a big problem? Yeah, but I would say it's probably more a symptom of the troubles of the problems of the era than a cause of it. Even though we can see that various kings at various points were concerned about the amount of liverymen out there. The third area that the exam board highlights in their assessment of whether the nobility were helpful or hindrances to the monarchy is local disorder and rivalries. And the question here is like, well, were local disputes a cause or an exacerbation of the wider problems in England? And they offer, they suggest that you look at 3 examples of local disorders. So I'll just quickly run through them now. The first one is the Nevilles against the Percys in the north. The Neville and Percy families, both very big in the north. The Percys, Henry Percy and his son Henry Percy and his son Henry Percy and his son Henry Percy. And you get the whole idea. They were the traditional holders of the Earl of Northumberland seat. They were Earls of Northumberland. But they suffered after Hotspur's rebellion in 1403. His estates were taken away, but his grandson, Henry, got most of those back by 1440, and they are around for the rest of our time. The Nevilles, in the first half of the 15th century, had been doing very well. Richard Neville became Earl of Salisbury. He was an advisor to Henry VI, and his son Richard becomes Earl of Warwick in 1449, the Earl of Warwick. The growth in power of the Nevilles and the fact they had lots of land in the north, despite Warwick being in the Midlands and Salisbury being in the south, they had lots of land in the north. This caused resentment amongst the Percys, and in 1453 that exploded into violence around some disputed estates which used to belong to the Percys, and now the Nevilles seem to be claiming. It's made worse by Henry VI being out of it in 1453. That's when he had his mental collapse. The Nevilles then support Richard of York in the Wars of Roses in the 1450s and early 60s. The Percys back the Queen and Somerset. In 1456, Henry Percy's killed at St Albans, stoking things further. It becomes a bit of an issue, but I would say it's probably only really an issue during those 1450s and early 60s. The rivalry seems to simmer down after that. Number 2, the Bonvilles and the Courtenays in the southwest. The Courtenay family, C-O-U-R-T, Court, E-N-A-Y. They were the traditional Earls of Devon, but they were so dominant in that region, but actually amongst the poorest of the earls nationally. The Bonvilles, and that's spelled exactly how you would expect, B-O-N-V-I-L-L-E-S. The Bonvilles, again, like the Nevilles, had grown in wealth and status in the 15th century. In 1437, Bonville became the royal steward of Cornwall. Threat to the Courtenays, violence between them. Bonville was backed by the Queen, backed by Suffolk. So Courtenay sides with the Yorkists. and actually tries besieging Taunton Castle to get his own back on the Bonvilles. Then you have a bit of a switch around. The Bonvilles support York, the Courtenays hook up with Margaret of Anjou. The whole thing, much like the Nevilles and Percys, is really kind of cooking and really fractious and violent during the 1450s, but again seems to settle down in the 1460s. Example number 3, the experience of the Paston family in East Anglia. The Paston, this is spelled Paston. This is a family of, well, they're quite on the make actually. They were some peasants in the 14th century to gentry in the 15th century. So when we're looking at them, they are kind of gentry. All their letters seem to have survived, or a great deal of them. And so they're sort of a case study, really, of what life was like in this period. John Paston got in trouble with a dispute over a will in 1459 that descended into violence, got out of hand, and took ages to settle. They then get in trouble with the Duke of Norfolk, who takes one of their castles. The whole thing is very, very tricky for them. And during the readeption, that exacerbates the thing. So this is an issue where the Pastons have trouble getting justice, and law and order seem to have broken down in East Anglia during the 1460s, late 1460s, early 1470s. The case study that the examiner wants to look at here is the readeption of Edward IV in 1471. And this is where Warwick, a classic example of the overmighty subject, had helped Edward IV get the throne, but had fallen out with him. And then allied with Edward's brother, George, Duke of Clarence, who was also upset with him, pops off to Calais, invades in 1469, gets defeated, goes back to France, sulks a bit, gets together with Margaret of Anjou, and then invades again in 1470, tries to bring back Henry VI, but is ultimately deleted in 1471 when Edward IV comes back and defeats him, and Warwick is killed at that point. The importance of this, I think, for local disputes is that during the 1470s, after the death of Warwick and Henry VI, slightly mysteriously, and Henry VI's son, Prince Edward, less mysteriously, at the Battle of Tewkesbury, it all helps to add up to a much less turbulent time in the 1470s. And Edward uses this period to establish the Council of the North under Richard of Gloucester, helpful but slightly overmighty subject. And he also sets up the Council of Wales under his son, helped by some of his family, Anthony Woodville being the most prominent of those. So this is a time when things seem to be calmer. And actually, during this time, Richard of Gloucester marries Anne Neville in the north, which helps too. So just on that kind of local rivalry thing, a lot like the retainers, I would say that they are a symptom of things getting out of hand and people being able to exploit the lack of central control and lack of central authority at those moments, either when Henry VI is king or during the readeption of Henry VI and then Edward IV, when authority is kind of blurry. You can certainly see that in the Paston story if you look into it in any more detail. But across the whole 110 years, I would find it quite hard to make the case that local rivalries are the problem stirring things up. It seems to me that it's more that at times of crisis and weak kingship that things get out of hand and become properly problematic. So I hope that's helpful. Next time we'll look at breadth topic 2 and see what we make of that. Thanks very much. Bye.